The top stories tonight in Y News. The Department of Energy sees a continued double-digit fuel price hike in the coming weeks.
The Trade Union Congress of the Philippines has filed a petition aiming to raise the daily minimum wage in Metro Manila from the current 537 pesos to 1,007 pesos.
Sinovac's COVID-19 vaccine may now be administered to children 6 to 17 years old.
The Philippine government has imposed a total ban on the deployment of overseas Filipino workers in war-torn Ukraine.
Good evening, Philippines and the world. We are now reporting live from Quezon City. Today is Monday, March 14, 2022. Join us in the next hour as we deliver today's top stories around the Philippines and in other parts of the world. I am Harleen Delgado.
We are also seen in 1,935 satellite monitoring centers nationwide and via live streaming worldwide through the UNTV News and Rescue social media accounts and our website, untvweb.com. I am William Theo.
First in the news. The Department of Energy warns that local pump prices of gasoline and diesel could hit as high as over 80 pesos per liter should the uptrend in the global market would continue in the upcoming weeks. Rosalie Cos has the story.
Officials from the Department of Finance and the Department of Energy will have a meeting with President Rodrigo Duterte tomorrow. This as the Philippines enter the 11th week of increasing domestic oil prices. However, the Department of Finance stood firm on its opposition to calls for the suspension of excise taxes on petroleum products.
The DOF would like to reiterate its position that it does not support the various proposals to lower or suspend the train fuel excise taxes because this will translate to significant foregone revenues, and this will be detrimental to our recovery and long-term growth.
The Energy Department has warned the public that the situation will be worse if the global oil prices will keep on increasing in the coming weeks. Based on its projections, local pump prices per liter of gasoline could hit as high as 86.72 pesos per liter if the Dubai crude oil prices reaches $140 per barrel. Diesel will be at 81.10 pesos per liter. 80.50 pesos per liter of kerosene and an additional 119.53 pesos per kilogram in the price of liquefied petroleum gas or LPG.
This is not just a problem of the executive department. This is a problem, of course, that will be solved with the participation of all sectors in the government. We have a framework where we have the objective of fair pricing, but still we are not unable to do that.
The DOE has appealed to local firms to consider some measures that would ease the impact of consecutive increase of domestic pump prices. This is through the implementation of increases on a staggered basis to relieve the impact on consumers.
The DOE has been strictly monitoring the sufficiency in supply, the quality of what's being sold in the market, and seeing to it that there's no short selling. We want to assure the public that our supply is sufficient, and what is really the problem is the cost of fuel.
Rosalie Cos, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Lawmakers from the House of Representatives are on standby should President Rodrigo Duterte call for a special session to address the looming fuel crisis in the country. Nel Maribohok reports.
The Makabayan Bloc lawmakers challenge House Speaker Lord Alan Velasco to personally ask President Rodrigo Duterte to call for a special session of Congress. The lawmakers said it is important to immediately tackle the measures aimed to soften the blow of rising oil prices. Thus, Bayan Muna Party List Representative Carlos Zarate renewed his call for the suspension of excise tax on fuel.
Kailangan nila ng immediate relief, no? And the immediate relief na talagang mararamdaman kaagad ay isuspende na muna itong excise taxes.
Other lawmakers are also worried over the impacts of the soaring fuel prices and called the government to fast-track the assistance to affected sectors.
Ang impact nito ay sa pagkain ng ating mga mamamayan, kaya talagang kami ay nangangamba. No?
Hindi makasasapat ang fuel subsidy. No? Nausad pagong ang distribution.
Earlier, Speaker Alan Velasco assured that the House is on standby in the event President Duterte calls for a special session of Congress. Velasco said he expects the Fuel Crisis Ad Hoc Committee to fully assess the economic impact of the drastic increase in oil prices and come up with recommendations on how the government can address the problem at the soonest possible time. Nel Maribuhok, UNTV News and Rescue, we serve the people, we give glory to God.
The Department of Transportation says the distribution of the 2.5 billion peso fuel subsidy for the transport sector may take up to 2 weeks. The transport groups meanwhile say more jeepney drivers may cease operation next week. Asher Kadapan Jr. details why live. Yes, Asher?
Early in public utility jeepneys and buses may already receive their 6,500 fuel subsidy from the government as they already have existing bank cards from the previous implementations of Pantawid Pasada program. But for other modes of conveyances, the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board still needs to collect their bank information, then produce and distribute their bank cards before they finally get their subsidies. These include taxis, transport network vehicle services, tourist shuttles, among others. While the LTFRB continually coordinates with the Department of the Interior and local government for the list of qualified tricycle and motorcycle food delivery service across the country. The LTFRB and the Land Bank of the Philippines target and commit to completing all these, including the actual distribution of the initial 2.5 billion peso fuel subsidy within the next 2 weeks. The Department of Transportation explains this in today's Senate hearing.
Within this week, yung buses and jeepneys po yung target because we already have an existing mechanism. And then within this week and next week, the other modes of transportation po that are covered by the special provisions will already receive their subsidies because card printing with Land Bank is also or will also be facilitated po.
Despite the availability of fuel subsidy, the National Public Transportation Coalition says they still call for the government to remove the excise tax in petroleum products. The transport groups appeal to President Rodrigo Duterte to issue an executive order to suspend its implementation. NPTC convener Ariel Lim explains that jeepney drivers no longer gain revenues in their operation due to the current high prices of diesel. Some of the drivers, he added, have already refrained from operating and more may follow next week.
Kami pa nga ngayon ang nakikiusap sa mga kasama namin na huwag nang tumigil kung kaya pa. Pero napagkasundoan ho ng mga elders of leaders ng bawat transport sector, pag hindi na ibigay yung mga pinangako ng gobyerno hanggang sa linggo, mapipilitan na Lunes.
Amid a call to suspend the excise tax implementation, the Pinagkaisang Samahan ng mga Chuper at Operator Nationwide or Piston says they will conduct a protest rally in different areas across the country. The Metropolitan Manila Development Authority, however, says they are ready for the transport strike set by the group of jeepney drivers as they pre-positioned buses and trucks providing free ride for possible affected public commuters. Harleen?
Thank you, Asher Kadapan Jr. reporting live from Quezon City.
Meanwhile, the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, or TUCP, formally filed its petition to the regional tripartite wage and productivity boards, requesting an increase of 470 pesos in the minimum wage of workers in the National Capital Region. Janice Inhente explains why.
From the current 537 pesos minimum wage, the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines or TUCP appeals to increase the daily income of workers in Metro Manila to 1,007 pesos. According to TUCP, the 12,800 pesos monthly salary is far from the 16,625 pesos monthly poverty threshold. The group noted the price adjustments of commodities and increasing oil costs in their call.
we challenge this government to immediately address the long-standing issues of our workers and families in Metro Manila: meager incomes, poverty, hunger, malnutrition, sickness, that is the very, very low and very poor quality of life for those who continue to sacrifice and contribute to the expansion of the national economy. Pay increase now.
In case the Wage Board rejects the petition of 470 pesos increase in wage, the UCP vows to file it again until approved.
Kung i-dismiss ang 470, yung petisyon ng 470 pesos, ipa-file namin uli yan. Dahil yan ang tawag ng panahon at yan yung tunay na sitwasyon na hinaharap ng manggagawang Pilipino.
Dabukluran ng manggagawang Pilipino, another labor group, is pressing for a 750 pesos minimum wage across the country.
Ito po ay nagumpisa sa isang petition. Ang kasunod na gagawin namin, if ever na hindi kumilos ang gobyerno, meron din kaming signature campaign na naghihikayat sa mga manggagawa na sumuporta sa labang ito. Pwedeng lumundo ito sa pagpapile ng notice of strikes. So yun yung mga lunduan ng aming mga pagpaplano, if ever na humantong sa ganon.
Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship and Go Negosyo founder Joey Concepcion insisted to wait for the approval of the proposal to reduce or suspend the fuel excise tax before allowing the increase of workers' salaries.
Ay importante kasi ngayon yung job employment, no? At wala pang isang buwan na bukas lang economy natin na medyo gumaganda yung mga benta ng mga maliit na negosyante. So dapat itong Ukraine conflict syempre nangyari, pero hintayin muna natin lumakas at si Secretary Bello ay will come up with a proposal, no? Pero we should try to balance the situation, baka masyadong maaga.
The said wage increase petition is a welcome development for the Department of Labor and Employment. However, the agency said it is up to the Wage Board to decide on the matter.
This petition of the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines is a welcome move actually para mapabilis yung proseso ng pag-aaral. The current wage is already not enough para tugunan ang pangangailangan ng ating mga manggagawa. At hintayin na lang po natin ang mangyayari dun sa Wage Board. We are pretty sure the Wage Board will do its job, study the petition in consideration of other factors, including business and economic factors.
Janice Hente, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Sinovac's COVID-19 vaccine can now be used for pediatric vaccination, providing another vaccine option for children aged 6 and above. Aiko Miguel reports why.
Health spokesperson Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeres said they are already drafting the guidelines for Sinovac that will be used for Filipino minors 6 to 17 years old. This after the Philippine Food and Drug Administration has granted emergency use authorization to Sinovac for pediatric vaccination. The vaccine expert panel submitted to FDA last week their recommendation, showing Sinovac's high efficacy rate against hospitalization and death due to COVID-19.
In prevention of COVID-19, symptomatic COVID-19, 74.12%. So this is vaccine effectiveness because this is real-world effectiveness data. In the prevention of hospitalization, it's 90%. In the prevention of ICU admission and death, both are 100%.
In an interview, Health Secretary Francisco Duque III assures there is enough supply of Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine in the country, unlike Pfizer's vaccines, which is a bit slow. Also, the VEP said the government no longer has to wait for a reformulated COVID-19 vaccine because Sinovac's dosing and formulation for children is the same as the one used for the adult population.
The dose is the same as the adult with an interval of 28 days or 4 weeks. But as far as we reviewed it, it's the same dose as that with adult. They're using the 6 microgram, which I think is the same dosage with the adult, no? Yung tinatawag natin na medium dose.
Currently, the country is using Pfizer for children aged 5 to 10 and 12 to 17 years old. Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine is also used for children 12 to 17 years old in the Philippines. Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The national government imposes total deployment ban of overseas Filipino workers in Ukraine due to security risk after Russia's invasion. Eileen Cerudo reports.
Crisis Alert Level 4 is already raised by the Department of Foreign Affairs in Ukraine. Under the alert level, mandatory evacuation of all Filipinos is implemented. The Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, or POEA, also imposed a deployment ban in Ukraine to further protect Filipinos from the ongoing crisis. Over 200 overseas Filipinos have been repatriated from Ukraine. The POEA assures repatriated Filipinos will receive sufficient assistance, such as finding new jobs that fits their skill set.
Habang naghahanap po sila ng trabaho, pwede rin po namin i-refer ng POEA sa ating po mga registered employers natin na kung saan may mga approved job holders naman kung gusto po nilang magtrabaho sa ibang bansa.
According to Llewellyn Perez, labor attaché of the Philippine Overseas Labor Offices in Prague, Czech Republic, only a few more land-based workers remain in Ukraine, while there are still seafarers awaiting their repatriation. Perez says they continue to coordinate with their counterparts in Moldova and Budapest to process the repatriation of stranded seafarers. Meanwhile, the Polo official have not received reports of Filipinos choosing to stay in Ukraine.
Wala na po kaming report ng talagang nasa loob pa ng Ukraine at opted to stay in Ukraine. Ang mayroon po ay yung mga tumawid na ng ibang bansa, ng ibang borders para maghintay na siguro para kumalma ang sitwasyon. Yun po ang mga plano nila before or maghanap na po ng ibang trabaho.
The labor attaché also adds other Filipinos in Ukraine opt to be deployed in other neighboring countries to find work. However, discussions are still ongoing whether Filipinos will be allowed to convert their visas into working visas in order to be allowed to find work.
Meron po kasing patakaran dito sa European Union na kung papasok ang isang tao sa isang bansa, kinakailangan may kaukulan siyang visa at ang entry visa niya ay dapat ay for the purpose of getting a work or dapat ma-convert yun into a work permit. At wala pong ganito ang ating mga kababayan. Wala po silang hawak na ganitong dokumento.
Eileen Cerudo, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, reported minor damages in Lubang Occidental, Mindoro following a magnitude 5.7 earthquake that struck the island province this morning. The NDRRMC said at least 3 houses were reported damaged in Barangay Vigo. However, further assessment is ongoing to determine the extent of the damages caused by the earthquake. Officials advised residents in the affected barangays to stay vigilant and watch out for possible aftershocks.
The Philippine National Police, or PNP, will now shift its attention to the rehabilitation and reintegration of drug dependents and users in its Oplan double-barrel finale. Leia Ilagan reports why.
The Philippine National Police launched the Anti-Illegal Drugs Operation through Reinforcement and Education, or ADORE. The ADORE is the final phase of the Oplan Double Barrel Anti-Drug Strategy, launched in 2016 to fight illegal drugs in the country. PNP Chief Police General Junardo Carlos said the campaign plan Double Barrel Finale version 2022 will focus more on the rehabilitation and reintegration of the million drug users who surrendered to the government.
We would like to have the end game strategy for this administration by completing the double barrel that we started in 2016. So this is a commitment by the Philippine National Police that through the reinforcement, this is our rehabilitation, recovery and wellness, and reintegration of the more than 1.2 million that surrendered.
The PNP hopes to intensify its campaign against illegal drugs in the barangay and street level.
We will go back to the streets now that we in a new normal, that the environment will allow us to reach out again to them, the victims of these illegal drugs. We will continue that, and we will continue reducing the supply by our law enforcement function together with the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency.
The program is in partnership with the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, and the Department of Health and the Dangerous Drugs Board. DOH Secretary Francisco Duque III said the agency shares the vision of a healthy country with the PNP through health promotion activities on substance use and abuse.
The DOH believes that substance use and abuse are a chronic but treatable medical condition. Treating this condition requires a holistic approach through a whole of government, whole of society, and whole of systems approach. There is indeed a need to ensure that individuals suffering from this condition receive sufficient support from the national down to the community level.
Leia Ilagan, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, said it will wait for presidential candidate Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte to make a decision on whether they will attend the Pilipinas Debates 2022 or not. COMELEC spokesperson James Jimenez says the candidates will not be turned away on the day of the debate, even if the two did not confirm their attendance. Jimenez added, although the written commitment is necessary, it is not a requirement in order to join the debates. Marcos and Duterte announced their non-participation in the debate. Marcos Jr.'s spokesperson, attorney Vic Rodriguez, said the presidential candidate will meet supporters on the field instead on the day of the debate.
Meanwhile, following the release of a new election survey, presidential candidate and Vice President Leni Robredo's camp believes it is not yet reflective of the gaining support they are receiving on the ground. Meanwhile, Vice President reiterates the need to dismantle disinformation as she pushes back fake news. Harleen Delgado will tell us why.
The camp of Vice President Leni Robredo believes that the recent Pulse Asia survey does not yet capture the intensity of support on the ground. The survey shows Bongbong Marcos on the lead with 60%, followed by Robredo with 15%. In a statement, Robredo spokesman Barry Gutierrez says the survey was done prior to the massive campaign rallies organized by their supporter volunteers, and it does not capture the recent surge in support for Robredo. Gutierrez adds they are confident of Robredo's victory with a clear momentum on their side. The survey was conducted from February 18 to 23, 2022, using face-to-face interviews with 2,400 registered voters with a margin of error of ±2%. Meanwhile, Robredo took to social media to debunk lies about her, including the one that she supposedly married a communist rebel at 15. Robredo says there is a need to fight back against fake news peddlers and dismantle disinformation that she has suffered for years. For the Vice President, she expects more attacks to come as it only means one thing. Her detractors are now seeing the shift on the ground.
Napaka-wild na accusation na dati na daw ako may asawa. Dati na ako may asawa. 15 years old ako nag-asawa. Yung dati ko daw asawa, NPA. Ito, lumabas ito 2016, hindi namin pinansin. Lumalabas ulit ngayon, tapos meron na siyang dagdag. Ordinarily, hindi ko to pag-aaksayahan ng panahon, pero because of the lessons from the past 6 years, sinasagot natin yung head-on.
Meanwhile, Bulacan Governor Daniel Fernando has officially endorsed Robredo for president.
Kailangan po ng ating bansa ng isang pinunong nakadarama sa kalagayan ng kanyang kapwa. Isang pinunong walang bahid ng korupsyon at higit sa lahat, isang pinunong may matatag na pananampalataya sa ating Panginoon Diyos.
Eastern Samar Governor Ben Evardone, a party mate and ally of President Duterte, also has expressed support to Robredo. In a statement, Evardone also believes that the recent statement of President Duterte stating the qualities that the next president should possess is a virtual endorsement of Robredo. The Robredo ticket will be heading back to Mindanao for the next leg of their campaign trail. Horilyn Delgado, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God. Presidential candidate Panfilo Lacson vows not to withdraw from his candidacy and will continue campaigning until the end of elections. Lacson says he was approached by a mediator of Vice President Leni Robredo's group telling him to withdraw from his candidacy. During the campaign of presidential candidate Bongbong Marcos and Vice Presidential candidate Sara Duterte Carpio, they vowed to lower electricity rates if elected. The camp said they will use renewable sources to achieve lower rates. Another presidential candidate, Caliodio de Guzman, calls on the government to increase stockpile and hold a special session to tackle the rising fuel prices. Meanwhile, Senator Manny Pacquiao casts doubts on the recent poll survey in favor of Marcos. Pacquiao said there are not enough respondents for the survey results to have a credible basis.
For the news abroad, Russia launched an airstrike with over 30 cruise missiles on western Ukraine on Sunday, killing 35 people. Marvi Delphine will give us the details live. Good evening, Marvi.
Good evening, Elsie. The targeted military base at Yavoriv was an important hub for Ukraine, as facilities were imperative for supporting the defense between Ukraine and other surrounding NATO allies. With 35 deaths and over 134 people injured, Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, named the day as a Black Day. He also called on the NATO leaders to consider Ukraine as a no-fly zone, a decision which the West fears may start a nuclear war. Many have speculated the attack was an attempt to trigger a response from NATO, as it was close to a NATO-allied country. However, on Sunday, NATO confirmed that at the latest, they have no personnel in Ukraine. Attacks in the form of missiles and airstrikes have increased since the beginning of the strike as Russian troops struggle to surpass Ukraine resistance. Currently, a total of 596 civilian deaths has been recorded by the United Nations, though it is expected to be much higher. Talks of a ceasefire remains in the process as President Zelensky attempts to negotiate with President Putin. Elsie?
So, Marvi, has there been any recent initiatives to provide safety for those fleeing Ukraine?
Elsie, there have been talks of having additional humanitarian corridors. If this is imposed, Zelensky predicts that over 130,000 people can be saved within a week. 10 more corridors was supposed to be established on Sunday, Ukrainian authorities said, but there was no evacuation made. President Zelensky is said to make negotiations for added evacuation routes. Back to you, Elsie.
Thank you, Marvi Delphine, for that live report. The United States has announced new sanctions after what has been described as the biggest intercontinental ballistic missile or ICBM test by North Korea. Mavian Dog will give us the details live.
Elsie, the U.S. Treasury Department announced sanctions against 3 Russian companies and 2 individuals for helping North Korea procure supplies to build its illicit weapons programs. According to the Treasury Department, Elsie, this is in violation of the U.S. and United Nations earlier sanctions against North Korea. The sanctions imposed by the U.S. blocks the access of the Russian entities to any U.S. assets that they hold. They are also blacklisted from the U.S. financial system. According to Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby, North Korea's recent launches were likely to evaluate the new ICBM system before conducting a test at full range in the future, and were disguised as a space launch. Meanwhile, the U.S. military has ordered enhanced readiness of its defense forces and intensified surveillance activities along the west coast of Korea's peninsula. Elsie?
Thank you, Mavian Dog, reporting live from Australia. As several countries have shifted to the new normal, China has locked down 17.5 million people in the business center of Shenzhen City. Ruth Bahe will tell us why live.
New cases of COVID-19 were recorded in the finance and tech hub city on Sunday, and all businesses except those that supply necessities have been ordered to shut down. Bus services to Shanghai has been suspended, and as the people of Shenzhen are put under restriction and are required to undergo 3 rounds of testing. On the mainland, 1,938 new cases were recorded, which is more than triple of the total cases reported on Saturday. While case numbers in China are low compared to other countries and Hong Kong, which recorded 32,000 on Sunday, authorities are enforcing a zero-tolerance strategy. This strategy, Elsie, involves finding and isolating every infected person. Shenzhen, also known as China's Silicon Valley, is home to some of the biggest tech companies in the country, like Huawei, BYD Auto, and Tencent Holdings. Elsie?
Thank you, Ruth Bahe, for that live report. Emergency services are urging people to download a new app that can pinpoint any location on Earth and is already said to have saved multiple lives. What Words uses a grid made up of 57 trillion squares measuring 3 meters by 3 meters. Each square has been assigned 3 random words. You can locate yourself on the app, and if you need to call 999, tell the operator the 3 words and they will be able to find you much more easily. It is particularly handy in rural locations or on long roads with a single postcode and can even be used offline.
Before we close, we will leave you with a word, giving glory to God. From the book of James, chapter 1, verse 5, it says, "If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him." Those are the reasons behind the news, March 14, 2022. Reasons we deliver to you as they unfold. I am Herlene Delgado.
And because we need to know, we will always ask why. I am William Theo. We serve the people. We give glory to God.